a tree with a branch 3 times, and a portal opened up and he stepped into it. I think the best way to kind of keep going forward is to keep, with an open mind, open heart with it. My name is Tom Franklin. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, and I now reside in Mexico. I became interested in the whole Bigfoot, Sasquatch, forest man phenomenon. I actually thought about this. It was during the 90s. I don't exactly remember when it was. My father was with a friend of his, and his friend was like, "Did you hear that they caught Bigfoot?" And it was a hoax, of course. And then I just was like, "What's that?" And I ran across, I don't know if it was Ripley's Believe It or Not or whatever it was on the television back then. And I seen the Patterson Gimlin film. And ever since then, it's been kind of a strong background interest of mine. And then when I started this podcast while moving to Mexico, I've always been interested in paranormal as well. And those two things seem to link up, also depending on who you talk to in the Bigfoot community, more or less. But these stories that I keep running across with eyewitnesses and alike have been extremely fascinating.
Hi, I'm Linda Eastburn of Linda Eastburn YouTube channel, and I have a new book out called Threshold to Encounters. It's about 40 years of research and experience with all of these wild cryptids that many of you I know have encountered yourself. You can find it on Amazon.com. They are. I've been interviewing people for about a year and a half, and it never ceases to amaze me, all the stories out there. So have you yourself actually, do you do any, boots on the ground research, or have you seen
No,
one?
no, I'm more or less a collector of stories, and I just want people to have a place where they feel that they can talk about this because my friend Harley Owens of Bigfoot Data and Reports, I don't know if that was the first one he reached out to, but at least one of the first ones he reached out to. And he was like, "Hey man, I have this photo evidence and this audio evidence and video evidence and of Sasquatch." I was like, "Oh, all right, man, show me." And he showed me, and it was extremely compelling. And he told me that he hasn't been able to hunt for 3 years. He actually had to quit his job and move into like a factory job. And I think ever since, I hope I had something to do with it. I'm sure he'll straighten me out. He's coming on alive soon enough. That he's been able to go back in the woods hunting, and now he's actually actively searching with friends of his using like Scott Carpenter's techniques, and he's been hitting it hard. And I think my podcast, The Eye of Jupiter, had a lot to do with the fact that he's been able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was lucky enough to get an interview with Scott Carpenter way back
Wow,
in
that's
the
cool.
beginning of my interviews with Bigfoot people. So yeah, I'm very fortunate to have that. He's a phenomenal person. So all of the interviews that you've done, all the people you've talked to, what are some of the stories that you have heard that have impressed you the most?
Oh, the one that just immediately pops out of my head is one from Daryl Benton. He always goes to the land between the lakes. He is somewhere outside of Nashville, Tennessee, I believe. And he was telling me a really interesting story where people were contacting him, and a friend of his, I can't think of his name right offhand, but they were saying like these creatures are bothering them up on their farm. Can you come and look? And he was like, "Sure, I'll go." And he while he was up there, he's seen some signs, and he had like a gifting area, I think it was. And there was one evening in particular where they were out in the field somewhere, and out of a wood line coming up a ravine was like this glowing bluish white ball of light. I think is how he described it. And it started getting really, really close to him, and it was about maybe 3 feet away, and his friend shined a flashlight on it, and it automatically changed from a ball of light into a possum, hissed at him. He became, and his friend and him became immediately sick. All their cameras and all their lights and even the truck, like alarms went off. And yeah, it was just the first one that pops in my mind while searching and trying to understand what these creatures are.
So this possum turned in, I mean, the
Mhm.
light turned into a possum, and it was a blue kind of glowing light. Was the light moving around before
And
it turned? Yeah, it was just moving
He
around like
said
an
it kind of
orb.
floated out of the woods. Yeah, he said it was kind of like floating out of the woods. He just seen it come out of the wood line. It was maybe, I think if I remember, if I recall, this has been like 6 months ago. It was like, I think if I recall it being like a foot off the ground and just kind of wafting kind of back and forth and floating up out of the ravine towards him, where they had like, his vehicle and his friend on top of the hill. And like I said, right before it got to him, his friend shined a flashlight on it, turned into a possum, hissed at him. He got zapped, as he calls it, which a lot of people are suggesting is infrasound. And he got like immediately like ill with a headache, and all hell broke loose.
Well, do you think did he have any indication that there was a Bigfoot in the vicinity before this happened?
Right. That's the reason why he went to begin with. That's the reason why he was there to begin with. He said there was other incidences that doesn't pop in my mind, because I've heard quite a few stories by now. But that one is just one of the ones that just kind of like you asked me, and it's the first one that came to the top of my head.
Yeah, I think I have interviewed Daryl. Also, very interesting
Fantastic.
person, a very authentic individual. I don't think, he's making anything up.
He used
Um,
to be a government official, actually, if I remember right.
yeah,
He couldn't come out about it until he retired.
yeah, yeah.
He had
Um,
also another encounter where he was. I'm sorry, he had another encounter when he was a kid where he had to go on his grandfather's property. His grandfather was like 93 or something, and he's like, "Yeah, where do I get the buck here?" And he's like, "Okay, you go over through 3 fields, over 3 fence lines, and then you go down the ravine, and right there is a creek." And he said he was hunting. He put up like some kind of rag with like deer urine on it or something, and stuck it in a tree. He's 6'4" himself, 6'5", something like that. He reached up, so that would be over 7 feet, I'd imagine, and he stuck it in the tree. Then he climbed one back over the creek, and like it's like a really steep ravine he had to climb up. He got up in his tree stand. So he said, all in all, to the bottom of the creek bed, he was maybe 25 feet in the air. And he's seen some deer, and then he's seen one. They were just doe, female deers. Uh, Ray of dropping golden sun. Anyhow, and they were and they were like kind of off a ways, and one of them looked up and got spooked and ran, and all of a sudden out of the this tree line, this creature came, and it walked directly over to the rag, which was right a little bit higher than its head, or no, excuse me, it was like right at his head or a little lower than his head. He just like took it right off, sniffed the rag, and looked right at him, and then yelled and screamed. And he said it echoed all the way up the holler. The way he described it was like it didn't have fangs. It didn't have the conical head. Like the teeth were more like human-like. They were more square and I wouldn't say chiclets, but squarish. It had facial expressions, and when it yelled, it just the whole mouth opened, and it got like angered at him, and he said he was just really, really afraid. And then the animal kind of like threw the rag down, walked a little ways, walked a little farther, and then it kind of like screamed one more time, and then it went where he couldn't see it. He waited for, I think he said like a half hour, and then he just jumped out of the tree stand, left his rifle up there and everything, like slid down a ravine, ran up, ripped his pants line over the barbed wire fence, went back to his grandfather's, opened the door, slammed the door. His grandfather was in the living room next to the wood heater, the wood stove, and he's, what's wrong with you? He said, Dad, Granddad just seen a monster. He goes, what do you mean a monster? I've seen, this thing, and he described it to him. He goes, oh yeah, that's a wood booger. And it was just so casual. Like apparently his grandfather on his farm and other people in that area have seen these creatures. And just to me, the chilling part about his way, his grandfather was just so nonchalant about it. And yeah, that was like I think the first Bigfoot story that was ever told on the podcast. I used to be another one, but then transferred into this one. But I remember that one being just shocking.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, I remember that story, and then he was afraid to go back out in that woods and hunt the rest of that time period, and then for a long time thereafter. It had an impact on him for sure.
Yeah,
But
most definitely. And he's not a shy man anyway. He's a big fella. He's been hunting his whole life, and he knows what's in those woods. And for him to say, "I don't know what the heck that was," is definitely holds some type of merit.
absolutely, yeah. And I think he's devoted a lot of time now to helping the Bigfoot, the whole subject matter become more public and out there for sure.
He has a huge Facebook group. I can't think of the name. It's something like Bigfoot Creatures and other something like that. And it's like the largest Bigfoot group in all of Facebook. And he has like Ron Morehead on there, and he has like a lot of like people who, he calls them big hitters, but like the more renowned Bigfoot either searchers or people who have experienced these creatures.
Yeah, exactly. So have you interviewed Ron Morehead?
Yes, I have. Yes,
So
I
what
have.
were your thoughts on his interview?
He's fantastic. He's one of the coolest customers that I've ever run across on the podcast. We kind of got into, the whole story of how he recorded them. I can't remember. I think it was in the early 70s, if I remember right. It was a hunting party in Northern California, about, I think, an hour and a half by, the way the crow flies to Bluff Creek, which is where the Patty Gimlin film was actually filmed, or whatever, captured. And he was just telling me that some friends up there like contacted him saying, "Hey, there's some crazy sounds at night." And he went up there. I'm sure people know the whole story, but I'm just going to, just what I recall. He went up there with some recording equipment and captured what is now known as the Sierra sounds. And those recordings were then taken to, I don't remember the name of the university, but run through, some type of analysis. And it was then authentically proven by this said university that the vocal ranges in which these sounds were created cannot be human. And they're also not recognized as any other animal that you would find in the forest. And then we got into his books, and he was just talking about the quantum field and how maybe these things kind of blink in and out. And we just got into like, philosophical concepts of, life and reality and things like that. He was just a very cool guy.
Yeah, I've interviewed Ron. He is a very, very cool guy. And I could listen to him all day. I mean, he has so many wonderful stories. And, his experience up there wasn't just Bigfoot. It was the sounds, of course, but just a lot of other phenomena. He saw, I think, a UFO craft, a dark blue UFO craft in the night. And they also saw rods moving through the woods. And
Rods?
yeah, the rods of light moving through the woods up there.
Rods of light. Okay.
Yeah, and I've heard a few
Yeah,
other
it's
see the
amazing.
rods. Yeah, rods and the orbs as well. Now, I don't know if that's a fairly new thing,
Yeah.
but I don't remember in years past because, I grew up in the country, and I grew up with a lot of people that did a lot of night hunting and, fishing, night fishing, and all kinds of things. They would have been in the woods, and they would have been there at night a lot. From all over. I live in Missouri, so it's all over the state, not just in one
Okay.
isolated
Mm-hmm.
location. I had relatives all the way to in the northern part of the state and all the way in the southern part of the state and the eastern part of the state. And I never remember any of them talking about orbs and rods or anything like that. So I don't know. I don't know the earliest time when this started being reported, but almost every time I do an interview, I don't know about you, on this Bigfoot situation, they're seeing orbs.
Yes. Yes, I was talking to people that are saying if you see a Bigfoot, there's probably two other phenomena that are associated with it within the immediate area, within like say 10 miles. They're coming like groups of threes. You'll have the Bigfoot sighting, you'll have some type of orbs or something of that nature, and you'll also a lot of times will have some type of UFO phenomenon. And that's been quite an interesting development that is new to me that I didn't know of.
Well, the whole UFO thing and Bigfoot has, that's been around for a while as far as being reported. I think up in Pennsylvania was the first time that I heard about it. But a lot of people do see craft and orbs, and they see a Bigfoot. I even heard a story the other day where this guy saw 12 pairs of Bigfoot eye shine, and then there was this fast moving light that came in, went down to a valley, and these things all turned around and ran to it down in the valley. Now, I don't know if that was an intentional meetup that was happening between this UFO and the Bigfoot, or if they were just curious and wanted to know what was going on with it and ran down there. But still, just interesting.
Because I've also talked to Chris Kramer. He has a lot of experiences with mind speak, if you'd like to go into that.
Yeah, tell me about that. I don't talk to a lot of people that have mind speak beyond having that feeling that they're there, or Just
Oh
having
yeah,
a simple message, like don't go there, or just turn around and go back or something like that.
right. Or where they pace you out of the forest and things like the rock throwing and the tree knocking and all that. Yeah, it's kind of weird that it's common play when you when you interview these people and interview these counties, I guess you would call them. Yeah, he's a very interesting guy. He actually vetted me. You know what I mean? I contacted him over Facebook. I was like, oh, who's this? Who's this guy? And he called me. He was like, "Who are you?" And I was like, "My name's Tom, and I run the podcast." And he was like, "Okay." And he's not trying to, make any money off of it. He's just trying to really get to the bottom of it. And he's been doing it forever. And he's located in Arizona, and he goes to, I think it's called the North Rim. It's like where the Colorado Plateau ends, and it's like a convergence of three national parks. Do not ask me to remember their names. And he has a group of guys that he goes up there with, and he always has mind speak. Like mind speak is where these creatures somehow can speak to you telepathically, and you can speak to them. And he was telling me it's never like a conversational kind of thing. It's more like a message or like a affirmation of what you're thinking, or the opposite, whatever that would be, a non-affirmation. And he was telling me, I just had him on, I think 2 weeks ago, and he was like, "Yeah, man, I can't come on, because I was trying to have him on before because his father had passed." And so he came back to Arizona after leaving Massachusetts, where his father was. And his friend's like, "Hey, you want to go back out?" He's like, "Sure, I guess, it's something to, take my mind off the situation." And he went up there, and there was a fork in the road, and it told him to go left. So he said, "Okay, I'll go left." And they're like, tell him to stop, and he stops. He gets out of the truck, and all of a sudden he got that feeling that something's there. And then he got this message in his head that we know that you've had a great loss in your family, and our condolences, that your father has passed. And it was it was one of those moments in the podcast where I was just like, oh my God. Also, Chris is an amputee. He suffered a job accident while working, yes, where like he is missing a large portion of his right hand, I believe. And he had a couple, like something like 15, 20 operations, I don't remember. And he was always in a lot of pain. And one time he went up there, and he said, they don't have a campfire. They don't use the gifting stuff. He said he's done all those kind of things. Another interesting thing is that he always, when he asked them, "What should we call you?" They always have the suffix of "gan," like like GAN or GAHN, or how you spell GAHN. I don't know how to spell it correctly, or exactly, but they seem to have like tribal names as well. And on this particular experience, so he was sitting there and he had a lot of pain, and he felt like as they were talking to him, he felt something in his back that moved to his right arm, and he described it as, I don't remember the words. It's like these pads you can hook to to your muscles, and you can put like a little electrical signal in there to like move your muscles. I get it when I go to the chiropractor. And he was saying he felt it. It was like not painful, but it was kind of numbing and a little bit uncomfortable. And they kind of told him, we see that you're in pain and this and that and the other. And it lasted for, I don't know, I think it was like 10 minutes or something. And then it went away, and his arm didn't hurt anymore. And ever since then, his arm hasn't hurt anymore. So who knows what's going on with this phenomenon? And the thing that bothers me the most about it, if I could be blunt, Linda, is there seems to be some type of internal civil war between the people who they call it the woo, which I think is odd. This is something to shoot the idea down. They like to do that with words. But basically, it's like the Bigfoot being like a paranormal type situation or concept, if you will. And then there's those who swear up and down that it's a flesh and blood creature, and they will literally get into like verbal battles. I mean, I know that there's been like lawsuits, there's been all kind of insanity human type concepts, and I'm here to like try to barter the peace by saying, if we're going to get to the bottom of whatever this phenomenon is, we need to work together and kind of put our petty differences aside. So I just want to kind of put that out there as well.
Well, exactly. And I know what you mean. When I first started this, I really didn't know a single thing about Bigfoot. I mean, nothing. I had seen no films. I'd read nothing about Bigfoot. I knew nothing about it. I just happened to do an interview with Scott Nelson, who was a linguist that had analyzed the Sierra sounds of Ron Morehead's. And,
Okay.
it just kind of took off, and I suddenly got a big Bigfoot following. So that kind of took me into the Bigfoot world. And at first, I was hearing the same thing, just a lot of information about them being, flesh and blood creatures, and that's what I thought they were. And then I started getting these other stories to come in, and now I just always ask. And almost always now, they have seen something that indicates that Bigfoot is beyond just a flesh and blood. Now, I do think they have flesh and blood properties. What do you think?
I don't know. I like I said, I've yet to experience it. Whenever I'm able to make a little more money because I am in Mexico and I moved here because of where's this going? Is it going to go on YouTube? Where's this
This will
going?
be on my YouTube channel. Yes.
Okay, so there's a certain thing that happened about 4 years ago
Mhm.
that we can't really discuss because free speech has been called by these big companies. But I didn't want it, and I chose not to get it. And I was living in Germany at the time, so I came over here, and that's why I started the podcast. And whenever I have the ability to make some money, I'm going to go up into these places. I want to try to go with Scott Pace, who has had some incredible encounters. I'm definitely going to see Chris Kramer and go with him. And there's some, I don't think I ever want to go to the LBL. That's a very, very, very scary place. And Thomas Suet, he's a First Nations person in Canada, and he's like, if you want to go with me, I can show you one that day. I take my boat out, and at a certain time of year, they actually go when the tide goes out. It's off of the Vancouver Island, and you can see them like breaking like mussels and clams on the shore, and they eat them right there. And I was like, so I'm in a boat and we can get away from them. He's like, yeah. So okay, I'll come. But what do I think they are? That's a very interesting question. The mere fact that we haven't been able to say pin them down scientifically shows that they're probably a little bit of both. Maybe they're interdimensional, or maybe they're remnants of, if you're biblical, which I'm not necessarily, just say Christian or anything like that. Maybe they're like to fit the, descendants of the Nephilim. Maybe I lean more towards they're kind of a different branch, if you will, of the evolutionary tree, and they have been the best players of hide and seek ever, and they somehow are the masters of their environment. If you've heard anything about these animals, creatures, human type relatives, they can move extremely fast. They're extremely good at being camouflaged. There's been, I just spoke to a woman in the Seattle area. I can't think of her name off the top of my head. And she said she just poked her head in the bush and there was one 6 feet away and she would have never seen it. They're just extremely like the masters of their domain. And when we go in there, like, there's all these dysfunctioning cameras. Trail cams won't catch them because they know that. So there's I'm somewhere in between them being like a species of humanoid that do not want contact with us, who possibly have some type of, like Native American type tribal connection to the universe and all of, I don't know, light and who knows, something of that nature. But honestly, I don't know. And I try to keep myself open for all possibilities.
Yeah, I do too, because I don't know for sure. And, all we really have are anecdotal things pretty much right now, even though
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of some really good, strong physical evidence as well. But you cannot explain some of the light phenomena, orange sparks coming off of some of them, the light shine, which isn't shine at all. There's no reflection. It's
Right.
light that comes from them. and
Hmm.
and then just like the mind speak issue and the fact that they can just poof be gone. They seem to almost glide. And then lately I've been hearing about this shimmering, almost glistening sort of energy look that's it outlines them, and they're walking along, but they don't really have a body. There's just this shine. Have you heard of that yet?
I've heard that. I've heard that a little bit with Bigfoot, but more so with Dogman. More
Well,
so
I've
with
heard it with
Dogman.
Dogman as well, but I've heard several with Bigfoot as well. Or
Hmm.
like they form, and it's almost like a pixeled, kind of image. It's not like it's not like a firm image.
Yeah, like a cloaking device or some type of cloaking either technology, or even that word cloaking is something that is new, but that's what we use to describe it. But like I said, I haven't heard that so much with Bigfoot. I have heard like you'll see them or you'll see a part of them, and then like they'll go behind a tree and then they're no longer there. I had a gentleman talk about where he's seen one hit a tree. It was like my absolute first podcast. We hit a tree with a branch 3 times, and a portal opened up, and he stepped into it. I've heard multiple things, but not so much of the cloaking, if you will.
Did he describe what that portal looked like when it opened?
He said it was kind of spirally. He said it just kind of slowly opened up. He was like, he was, what was it? He was like on a path somewheres in Ontario or something, somewhere in Canada. And he was like the thing, he was able to see it. It was a huge one, something like 10, 12 feet, something like that. And he's seen the big, there was like a path next to this large tree, he said. Um, the Bigfoot kind of looked in the direction up the path and then just like snapped the tree off, hit the tree like 2 or 3 times, I don't remember exactly. And then like this supposedly like this spiral slash like pixelated TV screen thing happened. And the Bigfoot just stepped like the left foot into it, right arm, left arm, and then just followed with the other part, and then it kind of closed behind him. And as that happened, maybe 5 minutes later, these 3 women who were out hiking or whatever walked down the path, and the guy who was telling us the story said, "Did you see that?" And they were like, "See what?" And yeah, so I don't know. It was incredible story.
Yeah, that is remarkable. I don't think I've had one that's that distinct. I've heard that people talk about them disappearing, they'd be there or even seeing a portion of the body, but not the whole body. But I don't think I've ever heard, that much of a portal type environment where they, kind of crawled through one body part at a time.
Yeah, I mean, it's all, if you haven't experienced it, it can be very difficult to, like I said, kind of comprehend or accept that. But the thing is that this is what we have to go on. And, there's been some really good videos as of late. I was, excuse me, I was checking them out, like, I think yesterday, like the best Bigfoot evidence so far. And of course, Patty Gimlin film was, then it was like, there was another one where there was like a skunk ape in a swamp, and you know what I mean. And these are videos of these things, and some of them were quite incredible. The way they move, how powerful they are. So who's to say? Who am I to say, as a listener of these experiences, to cast judgment upon someone else's experience? I haven't experienced it yet, but doesn't mean it isn't true.
Well, exactly. And when you hear enough stories that are backing all of these things up, there again, if I would have heard one or two stories about the orbs, I might could have just ignored that. But when you hear so many of them, then it becomes very difficult to just ignore that.
Yeah. And it
We have.
seems to be on the increase too. Just I don't know if it's because it's more accepted now, or because, excuse me once again, because of the internet. But it seems to be on the uptick. Maybe we're encroaching into more and more into these pockets of nature, and we are running into them more, or maybe they're becoming more emboldened, or maybe because I think this is my experience, but what I feel is that people are not as afraid of them because, for the most part, because I also listen to the Sasquatch Chronicles too, by the way. For the most part, they don't seem to be aggressive. It's more like, just leave us alone. And so people don't have that fear as much as they did. So they kind of just go into the forest more looking for them. And it just seems to be that it happens to be, a lot more people running into these creatures.
Yeah, that's true. But early on, I heard a story about this clan of Bigfoot, and this has been back several years that this was reported, that this clan of Bigfoot was in a wooded area beside an elementary school. And at the end of the day, when after everyone left, they would come out and go through the dumpsters and eat foods there.
Wow,
So
that's like bear activity almost.
it is, but I've heard that several times, that they're finding foods, so they're coming closer into urban environments as well, possibly.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of the same phenomenon as a bear. We kind of go into these areas. You have big front yards or big estates, an acre or more, 2 acres, and the bears will run through, or you'll see people with deer in a yard or a mountain lion. If these creatures are being forced out of their habitat, I would of course think that there'll be more sightings of them.
Right, exactly. Well, talking about the one that felt like that he was healed by this energy from the
Chris Kramer.
yeah,
Mhm.
I once interviewed someone who knew of someone who was in the wooded area, and he had some health issues, but anyway, he was quite a ways from his home, and he felt he became ill, and he kind of passed out. And when he woke up, he was actually back on his front porch, and there were
Oh
Bigfoot
my God.
prints in the yard. And he
Oh my God.
swears that Bigfoot brought him, carried him home and to safety, and probably saved his life, he thought.
Wow. That's incredible. You're gonna have to get me in contact with that individual.
Yeah, and
That's
well, I
that's
didn't
quite the
talk to the one
story.
that happened to, but I talked to a man that was his neighbor or whatever.
Oh, it's like secondhand, yeah, but
Yeah, it was secondhand,
yeah,
but he just, he felt like we don't really understand the whole Bigfoot relationship that we have with Bigfoot. At times Bigfoot does seem intimidating, doesn't want us in an area or whatever. But then other times there's these stories of healing and the story of, just rescuing this guy and taking him back to his home. I mean, I think that's just amazing.
yeah, absolutely. I can see that actually happen as well. I mean, if you're like, I also have heard that they're more aggressive towards fishermen than they are hunters for whatever reason. Um, I think it just kind of depends on the situation. If you're in the woods, and I think it's oddly enough, they can kind of read your mind a little bit, because if your intention is to harm them, you'll never see one. But if your intention is to like just kind of, see what's going on, sometimes they'll see them. But I think they get to choose as to whether or not you see them. So I think they also get to choose whether or not they want to be harmful to you or help you. So I wouldn't put that out of the realm of possibility.
Right, exactly. What do you think is going to be the best possibility of actually proving that they exist, regardless of what they are? What do you think is going to be the best opportunity for that to come about?
I think there's going to have to be some type of conversation that we're going to have with the quote unquote scientific community, who have basically dropped the ball on this. I feel I believe them to be true, from the eyewitnesses I've listened to. So if we can, like, somehow the people who actually go out and look for these people, they call it swatching, whatever. And if they can run across a legitimate group, there's plenty of them out there. Get some type of way in measuring, like, seeing them, because heat signature is very difficult because their fur is so thick. They also like kind of just stick their heads out, and it's not very good. I think there needs to be, and these scientists also need to have their hearts open to the concept of this existing. It sounds like such an absurd concept, but I believe that to be part of it. And maybe, have one renowned scientist, has literature out and whatever it is, who speaks to these people, doesn't go out with any instrumentation, experiences these things that these people are talking about, and then somehow, using, his scientific method or her scientific method and their devices in the way, that they can maybe figure out how to legitimize these sightings, and just kind of like, because I think the government already knows, because I've heard of stories where, it was, there was a guy on the military base. He was a sniper. They said, if you see anybody around here at so and so such hour, you need to take him down. He did so. He took it down, and Then as soon as they got taken down, the helicopters came out. A deuce and a quarter or a deuce and a half came, grabbed it. He walked up to it, and then like his officer was like, you didn't see anything kind of thing. And then he kind of came out after being in the military and didn't use any name, so I guess he's okay. I think they already know these things exist, and I think they don't want it to be real because what happens then? Then there's going to be, because it's all connected to the logging industry, there's going to be protected areas. Why would they put up signs in some states where they say, it's illegal to shoot one of these things or do not enter? You know what I mean? I think they know already. So I don't know what evidence that we could get, but the ones that I do like are specific pictures, like the one that Harley Owen showed me, the Sierra sounds, the Ohio screams. I think there's one. I heard one from a gentleman recently. I think he's a film producer, and he even has some recordings. I think those are very good. But a definitive, like, hey, here it is. Let's go to the circus and pay $2 to see this thing. I don't know if that'll ever happen.
I don't either. Why do you think the government would not want us to know about them?
Because, well, there's many reasons. I think it would kind of put a dent in religious institutions, at least somewhat, and kind of shake the foundation and faith of a lot of people. Maybe not too. I mean, if you look at the UFO, UAP, whatever you want to call it, we call them UFOs on my podcast. That hasn't made anyone like less, religious, but maybe that's something to do with it. Once again, like I mentioned too, or alluded to, is the logging industry. Like there'll be more protected areas. Therefore, once again it goes into the pockets of somebody that they don't want that to happen. And they the government has to show strength. The government has to show that they have everything under control. You know what I mean? So if they're saying, okay, these things exist, but we don't know how to capture them, or we don't know, or you know what I mean, we don't know what to do with them, that shows like a chink in the armor, and they want to project power. And I think that has something to do with it as well.
I heard someone say once that if these Bigfoot are really related to humans, they might have even considered a form of a human being. Then what do we do with that? I mean, what rights do they have? How do you protect them? Or, there's just a buku of things that we would have to address at some point if that were the case.
Yeah. I just think we would just have to. It's kind of like, running in things like YouTube. It's not protected under free speech. And I think it should be. But before it existed, we never thought that there would be something like that. So we're still trying to, figure that out and what that is. But if these creatures, entities, humanoids are real, and I do feel they need to be protected under some type of human, some type of human law, violations and laws and things that protect them, and how that plays itself out we'll do it, and it will happen in due time. But I don't think that should be a reason why they shouldn't. That's just me.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are many other things. I've been a UFO researcher for many years, since the 90s. And there's so much of that information that haven't been told, of course. And, and there again, they have their reasons. And I'm not one of those demanding people. They should tell us every little thing they know. But certainly they don't, that a lot of that has been held back and very secretive for a long time.
Yeah, that's also like, I mean, I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist. It's probably some Operation Blue Book stuff. It could also be that there's other government agencies that actually have the technology that we have, because that military technology is at least 50 years ahead of the technology we have. So these things are happening over the airspace. They want to know what that is. So they're like, this could be, remember the air balloon, the weather balloon that went over the Chinese, it was a couple of years ago, and they were just kind of flipping out about that. And I don't know, to be honest with you, what to say.
Yeah, exactly. So, so do any of the people that you interview and talk with regarding the Bigfoot thing, do they talk about UFO craft? Have any of them had like firsthand experience with aliens or anything like that?
I don't know about the UFOs so much, but I do know they tell me that Scott Pace, the great Scott Pace, he tells me things where they will somehow, I don't know what the wording is, but somehow they'll move his keys in the house, or they'll lock a door, or they'll bang on the wall, or somehow mess with his devices. And he don't know if that's the government doing that, but he feels it's the Bigfoot, or I can't remember the name he used called for them. He's told me stories about going to a reserve in Nebraska. It's about 2 hours north of Omaha. And of course, if you know, in the Midwest, there's very little, tree coverage because of it being the breadbasket of America there. So, like he says, they're super concentrated in there. And yeah, I don't know if he's just. I've heard like just the oddness of them like banging on houses and weird things happening, like animals dying, which can be kind of connected to like cattle mutilations, which can kind of be connected to crop circles and UFOs, but directly UFOs and Bigfoot put together with the people I've experienced. No.
Yeah, I had an experience watching an orange light above a field where there were three cows mutilated that night. I didn't see the mutilation, I just saw the orange light, and later found out that orange light is associated somewhat with animal mutilations. What do you think that's about? Why do you think those animal mutilations are occurring?
Wow. Phew, yeah, a lot of heavy questions on here. What are animal mutilations? Okay, I guess my first shot in the dark here will be, okay, if we are a biological a carbon-based planet, I do believe that UFOs are interdimensional, by the way. Then they're able to pop through into this reality, and they just kind of want to, I guess, study us. I don't know why they would pick cows in particular, but it being, because also there's been people who've been with probes and things being left in their in their skin. One guy was telling me he had like a little like metal bead in his, I think it was his ear or something like that. No, his elbow or knee, one of the two. I just think that they're interested in the carbon-based type, animals that are on this planet, and they also instinctively or somehow know that if they were to do that to us, that would be just so outrageous, and that they wouldn't be able to continue with their experiments. But at the same time, as I'm speaking this out loud, they are leaving behind, because supposedly in his mutilations are like they're clean cuts, there's no blood, there's no like sign of struggle, but still the oddity of it would raise hairs amongst the people. But since they're animals, humans don't have the same type of kinship or feelings we would have if it was a group of children or something of that nature. So I think they're trying to study us without directly killing us. But like I said, there's also been, stories where, they go onto a spaceship, and the spaceship will look from the outside like the size of a medium-sized one-bedroom apartment. And then they go inside and it's the size of a football field. And like they'll cut their arms off and reattach them or whatever, and they'll come back and they'll be like, and they'll have like a sore shoulder. But I don't specifically understand the animal mutilations per se.
Yeah, those are a mystery. I know that that's very strange. What about paranormal things? Just unusual, like poltergeist activity or ghost activity around people
Oh
that
yeah.
have Bigfoot experiences as well. Do you think there's a thread that runs through that whole UFO, Bigfoot, ghost kind of experiencer?
I think it I think it does. It seems to be a connection between them somehow. I don't I've experienced poltergeists myself as a kid, which is one of the big reasons why I do my podcast. Um, but if, I didn't see any Bigfoot because it's in the middle of the city, which doesn't mean it can't happen. I've heard about, there's places here in South America where there was a video. No, it was in Germany, where they showed these creatures walking down the streets in Germany, like in a small town. Um, the connection is definitely there. But what that indicates or what it means, I don't quite know.
Yeah, some people feel like it might be a genetic thing because it tends to run in families, in generations of people that have
Hmm.
various, or it could be, just a way that someone learns how to perceive, a reality that maybe I haven't learned how to perceive yet.
It's kind of an opening, like, because I got, like, I was, I don't have to talk about it, but I got slammed into that reality with me and my two sisters, my sister and my half sister. And that kind of just got slammed into my head and confronted with it. I think some people, there's just a certain, I think it's a mindset more than anything. Like, the more I talk about these things, the more things happen around me, and that's for real. Like, I've seen my second smoke entity here at my work, and I've seen it at a buddy of mine's house. I own 10 acres here in the middle of the rainforest, not rainforest, the jungle. That's a little different. But I've had weird experiences out there with lights and voices. So I think what happens is, either these, Bigfoot, they kind of understand that you're ready for it, or you're open to it in advance, or they can somehow sense your intentions, and somehow all these are somehow oddly linked together. It's some type of phenomenon. I don't know if we want to link it together. I don't know if we want to have a unified field theory of gravity or something like that to make this all work out. But there's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Like, people are like, oh, it's the scariest thing ever and blah blah blah. There's a lot of that on YouTube going around. Um, but I don't think that's necessarily the proper way of going about it, but that's just my opinion. I think the best way to kind of keep going forward is to stay open about it, look at it from a logical standpoint, also look at it from the human standpoint, because there is some, so some charlatans, some hucksters who make things up so they somehow, because they have some type of, I don't know, some type of complex where they have to be, center stage or something. Um, that's almost impossible to call people out on those kind of things unless it's just so obvious sometimes. Especially if you hear the same story and it just changes or something. I don't know how we deal with that, but I think we just need to keep kind of, with an open mind, open heart, and proper, ways and procedures of maybe going about these things, and maybe just new ideas that we haven't heard of before, and see if these things are connected. If they are, how, and what are the implications of that.
It may need new science to be able to figure some of it out. It may not fit conveniently into what we already know, but it seems as if they're headed down some roads that maybe open up some new ways of seeing all this. So you had a poltergeist experience. Now that was the first thing that kind of pulled you into this whole, wow, what's happening
Yeah,
here? Tell me about that, if you would.
yeah. I was yeah, sure, sure. I was 8. Um, my little sister was 7, and my half sister was like 13, 12, 13, something like that. And my mother would have she had like partial visitation rights, so like every weekend or every other weekend, I don't quite remember, she would come and stay with us. But at that time we were living in my grandmother's house, and it's a row home, and upstairs in the back room there's the stairwell, and then there's 2 rooms, and there's no hallway. There's just, you go into one room and then you go into another. And we stayed in the back room, my sister and I on one bed and she on the other, and my parents had the room before that. So every weekend in the summer of 1988, it's 337 South Fulton Avenue in Baltimore, Maryland. I know exactly where it is because it's burnt into my mind. You can ask my sisters today; they both had the same recollection I do, slightly different, but nonetheless, we know it happened. Um, we were just like, it's about 9, 10 o'clock at night. Parents like, okay, guys, go to bed. It's on the weekend, of course, like I was saying, and I'm on my side of the room. It's open. Um, And we're laying in the bed and we're trying to go to sleep, and all of a sudden the lights start flickering off and on. Then the light switches, in the same room, and it's only at the end of the bed on their side, maybe 2, 3 foot from the end of the bed. And the lights would flicker off and on, and we're screaming, and my parents are yelling up the steps, like, stop playing around, because they think we're just playing around, or they're thinking that the older half sister, was just like playing games on us and trying to scare us. And then shoes started like getting thrown around the room, like literally, like they were all against the wall. So if you go to the first bedroom, you go into the second one. On the left side is the wall for the next house, and then where the two houses connect. And there's just a row of shoes, like a couple pair for the 5 pair of shoes, and they were literally being thrown at us on the bed. Like, I remember them flying in the air and hitting me and hitting them. And we're screaming like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And, "Oh my God, help us, help us." They're still yelling and whatever. So my little sister goes, "I'm going to go tell them." She goes down the steps, and they're like, "Get out of here, go upstairs. You're just playing around." And this happened a few times. My sister also told me do you remember the show in the 80s, Alf?
Yes.
Yes, there used to be a little puppet, and it's like so she had Alf, like a little puppet, and she used to sit in this little high chair she had, and she told me I didn't see this, but she told me she distinctly remembers it getting up and actually moving. She said it was dancing. Um, so she went down 2 or 3 times, and then the third time she went down, I was standing in the room, and she was coming up the stairwells, made a right, walked through the first bedroom, and the door to the room that we were sleeping in swung into the room I was standing in. So I go to say to her, so what did they say? That's exactly what I said. So what did they say? And then as soon as I said that, the door swung past my face and then slammed shut. Um, Scared me. I couldn't move. There's a fight, flight, and the one that people forget is freeze. I literally couldn't move. I have never, ever since then, I haven't been that afraid. And I've went to the Kosovo conflict. I was in the U.S. military. Wasn't that big of a deal in comparison. And she opened the door and said, "Did you slam the door in my face?" To which I replied, "No." What I would understand why she would say that, because I'm the only one who could reach and slam the door, but I didn't move my arm. It was dark, but it wasn't me. Then she like kind of like walked me to my bed. My little sister was the brave one, tucked me in. I started feeling like I felt like, even though there was no fan on or nothing, there felt like air currents or something was between, because I had the sheet over top of me, because the sheets protect you because when you're scared. And it felt like there was like a breeze inside there, like kept blowing around, like it would puff up on one side and then move to the other side. And there's one thing that scared the living daylights out of me. There's a separation between the bed and the wall of about, I don't know, I'd say 6 inches, maybe less. And something, I didn't see it, but something reached up in between the bed and the wall and put its hand on my chest. And I jumped out of the bed screaming. And it really traumatized me as a kid. So and ever since then, no one believed me, no one believed us. But that's what happened.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine that would be a very scary moment.
And it only happened when she was there. When me and my sister were alone during the week going to school, whatever, it was fine. But when she came, it would happen. So they always thought that if she was just kind of like, pulling her chain or whatever. But I come to realize later when I started like looking into it. But it seems to be, it happens to like adolescent, prepubescent, like males as well as females, but more towards the female side, when they've had a very traumatic experience. And then I found out later in life that my little sister, or my half sister, excuse me, well, she's smaller to me now. I'm much larger, but that she actually did have something extremely bad happen to her, and that when that happens, somehow it's able to manifest itself physically, and that seems to be a typical situation in which poltergeists persist.
Yeah, I've heard that poltergeist situations can be a projection actually of a person doing it, but they may not even realize they're doing it.
Oh yeah, and my sister, my younger sister, then later in life, after I was in the army and I lived in Germany, she lived with her for a period of time, and she swears that whatever entity was in that house when we were young was still following her around, my half sister. And literally at one point, because I had her on the podcast too, chased her up the steps, and like she jumped onto the bed where they were staying, her or my half sister and her boyfriend at the time, and jumped in the bed, and as she did it, the door slammed behind her. So who knows what that is?
Yeah, but it just doesn't make sense that, that something is moving around and it seems very dangerous and such. And I've questioned a lot of people about even the Bigfoot phenomena because they appear and then they disappear, ghosts appear and disappear. And I'm thinking, well, why are we not putting Bigfoot in that category?
Right.
It seems as if they're exhibiting a lot of those same characteristics as a ghost does.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say we should jump to that because one is kind of like, you have the residual hauntings where things kind of like just repeat in a pattern. Then you have the intelligent hauntings like poltergeists or the ones where you can, pull out your EVP, ask some questions, and it'll respond to what you asked. That's interesting. But I don't know if we could, I mean, they seem to be similar, but one is not quite the same. It's more in the forest. But like Dogman, for example, I've talked to Matt Imsh. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah.
He has an incredible Dogman encounter, and that happened in an old industrial area in Ohio, Youngstown, actually. And that wasn't even in the forest. That was in an industrial area in the middle of a city that was like run down and dilapidated, but it still had a rail line going through it. So I don't know if I would make that leap entirely, but I would lean more towards that way, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I have talked to Matt, and he does have an incredible story, and he has such a centered and direct way of telling his story. It's almost like watching a horror movie.
It is. It was at the end, not the end, but after he kind of like when he was saying that he was okay and that his friends were okay. Later, they weren't okay. Two of them kind of really went down a bad path because of that situation. And him talking to his father, and his father, and I think his pastor or his priest, whatever you want to call it, were the only two people that kind of believed him. The way I mean, I got all teared up, man. It's an incredible account. And yeah, it's who knows, because that one, the Dogman one, scares the living daylights out of me. Bigfoot seemed to be a little bit more, benevolent, excuse me, and the other ones, the Dogmen seem to be a little more malevolent. And when he talks about this thing where it moved fluidly and it looked like it was half there and half not, and the width of its shoulders being like 3 foot and it's like 12 foot tall, and you can with the way he was discussing the fire in the building where lit this fire in this old blast furnace that no one was there, just kids, and like the shadows going up the walls, and the way he talked about that, it's either the most riveting written Stephen King, non-Stephen King novel you've ever heard in your life, or as I see it, the truest, most insane account, other than maybe what's his name's family right now. He's a gentleman who was in the LBL. What is his name? I'll think of it in a minute. But those two accounts for me are the most insane. I'll pull his name out of my butt here in a second. I can't think of it right now.
Exactly. I have to agree. He has just an unbelievable account. So if someone wants to watch your podcast, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, you can contact me, or the podcast, you can just find it on YouTube, the Eye of Jupiter podcast, or just the Eye of Jupiter, and it's the one with the little alien on it, an eyeball. You can also find me on Rumble. You can also find me on Spotify, or you can just contact me on my email address, the Eye of Jupiter podcast @gmail.com.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I want to thank you for joining me tonight. It's been a joy to talk with you.
His name is Martin Groves. I'm sorry, I just came to me.
Martin
sorry,
Groves,
Linda.
yes.
His name is Martin Groves. Martin Groves.
Yes,
There it is.
He has a remarkable story as well.
Remarkable.
Thank
Sorry,
you for
Linda. It
adding
just
that.
came and I was like, oh, I got it.
Gotcha. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end our interview tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll let you know when this comes out.
Well, thanks for having me on.